Alright, bro. Be careful around this ledge. For the floor is thin and there's this insane chamber beneath the prison.
I got it, bro. I'll be fine. Just keep watch and I'll let you know when you can cross.
Sounds good, sounds good. Go ahead, I'll be right here. No problem.
Walking around the corner. Oof! Whoa. That felt like something that happened in a movie I watched once. Where am I? Hello? Hey there. You wouldn't happen to know where any milk is, would you? I've been on this 3-week expedition and haven't found any. Can you help me?
And what's taking him so long? Oh my god.
Hello YouTube and welcome back to The Theory Crafters, the show that's not afraid to give you a splash of cold water when it comes to the story behind some mods. Last video, we dove into the bowels of a cursed pyramid, where we dusted off the story of the ancient remnant. This video, we intend to take a bit of a change of scenery and explore the frosted prison of Maledictus. However, before we begin, our goal this year is to provide you guys with some more awesome content, as you have seen with our sped up uploads regarding Cooking with Piam and our regular theories, without sacrificing quality. One of the best ways to do that is to keep our channel growing. So according to YouTube, only about 30% of people who watch our videos are actually subscribed. So if you like this type of content and would like to see more of it, consider subscribing. I would also like to take a moment and thank our 3 channel members. We have Anita, Abigail, and Critics. Thank you all for supporting the channel, and we are back to the video. I hope you guys are ready to endure Minecraft climate change as we take a trip to the frozen tundras and excavate the story behind the berserker Maledictus. At the end of the last video, we alluded to the fact that Maledictus came from Norse mythology. While this certainly has some truth to it, the name Maledictus does not appear very often within the stories the Vikings told. Instead, the name Maledictus is far more common within the Harry Potter franchise, though in that series they are described as female characters that inherit a female-only blood curse that turns them into a beast. Now, we won't be referring to this version of Maledictus, as the Maledictus in Harry Potter is far different from the Maledictus we see in Cataclysm. Instead, I believe that the Maledictus is inspired by the Berserker King from the game God of War Ragnarok, which is itself inspired by the story of the Danish king Hrolf Kraki. If we take a look side by side between the two kings, we can pick out some similarities. Here we can see some striking resemblances between the two. Most notably, the horned helmet and generally blue and gold color scheme shows that it is clear one is inspired by the other. Of course, Maledictus was likely the one whose design was inspired by the Berserker King, as Maledictus was released as part of a Cataclysm update in 2024, and God of War Ragnarok released in 2022. The dual wielding of weapons is also a trait shared by both entities, and even then the weapons are quite similar. In Cataclysm, Maledictus dual wields the Annihilator, a mace-like weapon with the design also akin to those of axes. In God of War Ragnarok, King Hrolf Kraki uses axes as his primary weapon. You might have noticed that I used the Berserker King and King Hrolf Kraki interchangeably, and that is because the Berserker King in God of War Ragnarok has a boss bar labeled as King Hrolf Kraki, indicating they are one and the same. So, who was this king? Hrolf Kraki was a legendary Danish king, recognized for his immense strength and prowess. He sat on the Danish throne at an early age, as his father passed away when he was a boy. Under his rule, Denmark flourished as a civilization, and soon he was renowned for his military achievements. Because his early life remains much in mystery, he is often accepted to be a Viking berserker. Not only was he an incredible king, but his sword is said to be magical. His sword, forged by the dwarven blacksmith Valent, is believed to have magic course through its vessel, and this magic grants whoever wields it immense strength and even invincibility. This detail of invincibility will be relevant later when we talk about where Maledictus is within Cataclysm. You might be listening to this thinking that King Hrolf was immortal, and impossible for him to meet death. Unfortunately, even he couldn't live forever, as his story ends with betrayal. By who is debated, but according to the British website Norsecraft, it was by the hand of his half-sister Skuld. While there is plenty more to cover about this particular Danish king, we do have to continue the video. So what about the minions we see running around the frozen prison, the Draugrs? As it would have it, Draugrs also have a place in Norse mythology. To understand the Draugrs, one must first understand the Vikings' beliefs surrounding death. For the Vikings, death wasn't simply the end. Rather, it was a transitional period between the land of the living and the land of the dead, or even sometimes Valhalla. While this was generally a happy time for the recently departed, some of them may not have been happy and instead became what are called Revenants, vengeful spirits who wanted to take out their anger on those who wronged them. These Revenants became known as Draugrs and are doomed to continue walking through Midgard, the name for Earth in German cosmology. Draugrs are described as being blue and black and possessing superhuman strength. Within Cataclysm, there are a couple ranks of Draugrs that roam the halls of the Frosted Prison. There are of course Draugrs, elite Draugrs, and royal Draugrs, likely a hierarchical system within the prison. There's also a much stronger Draugr held within the Frosted Prison known as an Afterganger. Aftergangers are much larger than even the tallest Draugrs inside the prison and are the mini boss brutes of the prison. Within Norse mythology, it is largely accepted that Aftergangers and Draugrs are likely one and the same. Even their names seem to be two parts of the same story. Draugr means one who shows restlessness on the road to burial, and Afterganger means one who walks after death. Norse mythology is incredibly interesting and is certainly what the Frosted Prison and its inhabitants are based off of. But what even was the prison built for? Who built it and why? The Frosted Prison within Cataclysm seems to have been subject for many years to the elements. Being built in the frozen tundras of Minecraft, the blocks of the prison almost tell the story of what they've been through. 90% of all the blocks in the prison are either frosted over or ice and icicles. Some icicles can even reach up to 8 meters in length, and while this size isn't all too much to write home about, given that in the right conditions some icicles can grow as fast as 1 centimeter per minute, it wouldn't be much of a stretch to assume that they have been there for many years. The fastest time one of these icicles could have grown to the length is about 13 hours. Within the prison, there are also a number of job sites. While it isn't uncommon that prisons have workrooms for their inmates, there are only about 2 or maybe 3 common jobs that were offered to the inmates of this prison. The first one appears to be a smithing job, complete with anvils and blast furnaces. Blast furnaces are of course the job site of armorer villagers, and while anvils aren't technically a job site in Minecraft, we can make the assumption that these were used to forge weapons and tools. Also within these smithing rooms are a number of black steel blocks, the primary material used for the weapons and likely armors used by the Draugrs and Aftergangers. There also appears to be another room full of decorated pots, and while the decorated pots are scattered throughout the prison, they all seem to be made within the prison. This room, for example, has an absurd amount of pots, and I don't think there's a room with this many pots for the sake of having that many pots. The pottery sherds on the pots are also interesting, consisting of the sherds Danger, Shelter, Archer, and Blade. Like we did in the last video, we will try to uncover the meaning behind each sherd. Onto the pottery sherds, as mentioned, we see Danger, Blade, Archer, and Shelter. If the ancient Remnants pyramid had sherds that told a simple story, couldn't the Frosted Prison? After all, some of the oldest accounts of recorded history has been painted within pottery of people long past. While these sherds don't tell a story as clear-cut as the Remnants does, there is certainly something of substance there. Blade and Archer are quite simple as they reference the 2 primary weapons of Maledictus. Danger could simply be a warning about the naturally dangerous inmates of the prison, but Shelter may have a little bit more of a story. The Shelter pottery sherd may be referring to the prison sheltering the inmates from the brutal cold. It may even be a reason as to why Draugrs roam the halls today. In fact, I almost certainly believe the intensely cold environment the prison was built in contributed to the misery the inmates felt in their final moments, turning them into Draugrs. If you remember, Draugrs and Aftergangers are spirits that were unhappy in their final moments and carried that unhappiness into the afterlife. While obviously the cold played a part in this anger, I believe there's more to it. What happened to the inmates in life that would turn them into vengeful spirits in death? Admittedly, there is not a lot to go off of in terms of physical evidence that the stay at the prison was miserable, though we know it must have been if we choose to believe that the inmates became the Draugrs we see today. I believe the guards might have been quite tough when it comes to how they treated the prisoners, as there are a couple skulls scattered throughout the prison outside of cells, almost as a decoration. I wonder if the guards might have executed inmates who got out of line and placed their heads where prisoners could see so that they would know not to get out of line. If they did, well, we see what happened to them. The food might not have been all that good either, and it is likely they only gave the prisoners the bare minimum they needed to survive. Within the prison, there is one kitchen-esque area where we see bundles of hay. This kitchen is sat right across from another room with more bundles of hay. We also see some sea pickles and mushrooms, though it is likely the sea pickles are a decoration to look like cups. As for the mushrooms, they have a very minimal amount of protein in them and are likely insufficient to sustain the population of inmates given the amount of cells there are. So, where did the prisoners get their protein? A detail within the kitchen may give us a rather gruesome answer. There is a skull right next to the suggestion of a cutting board, and while it is a terrifying assumption, a place like this, in an environment like this, may have left little options for meat. So, the prison may have treated the prisoners terribly, even by prisoner standards, but it clearly worked, and it might have been in service for a while. However, it is largely abandoned today apart from the spirits of the undead. Where did the guards go? Well, some might have fallen alongside the prisoners, as we see different ranks of draugrs in the prison. For example, we see both elite draugrs and royal draugrs. Elite draugrs look to be standard guards with their crossbows, and royal draugrs look to be rather glamorous, with their golden trims on their armor. With the name Royal Draugr, they might have been either high-ranking inmates or could have been royalty visiting the prison. If we assume it was royalty visiting the prison, then the story of the prison's end becomes far more interesting. The beginning of the end starts with a storm. An important detail I've neglected to mention up until now is that the frosted blocks are present well within the prison as well. Some of the walls of the prison are incredibly thick, and it might have been quite difficult for the cold to make its way into the walls of the structure. On top of that, there are plenty of extinguished campfires within the building that would have stopped ice from building up on top of the walls, so they were likely well protected from the majority of the brutal cold of the tundra environment. Of course now, there is plenty of buildup of ice on the blocks as well as an abundance of extinguished campfires throughout the prison. What this tells us is that something must have happened that was strong enough to push through all of these defenses and bring the prison into the state it is today. I propose the theory of an immense blizzard, one of biblical proportions that would have accelerated the process of freezing over the prison. If we look at the prison from an outsider perspective, we see that it was clearly built to be lodged into the side of a mountain peak. While it doesn't always generate on top of a mountain, it is clear that this was its intention. Mountains can be bone-chilling and subject to terrible blizzards and avalanches at the right altitudes. What if an intense blizzard came through the area, accumulating more and more snow every second until eventually the snow buried portions of the prison underneath it? The temperatures dropped well below freezing and the guards escaped the prison. Some were less fortunate and were unable to leave, but the majority of them made it out. However, the most unfortunate would be the inmates themselves. Locked away in their cells, all they could see was panic in the eyes of those who abused them, and in their escape was one last moment of cruelty, leaving them to die. Days pass. Those who were lucky died early, but those who weren't had to hopelessly endure the frigidity of the temperatures. Some found clarity in their final moments and are left in their cells as simply skulls. They did not die in anger and vitriol, so they didn't become the draugrs we see today. These prisoners have their souls within the numerous soul lanterns that illuminate the halls now, symbolic that in death they found light, and now themselves would like to be the light for others. Sadly for most, their last breaths were shrouded in fear, anger, hate, and a flurry of negative emotions, and when they died, they then became the vengeful revenants of the draugrs, forever cursed to roam the halls of the prison. They spent their life there, and now they must spend their death there too. There is some evidence for the fact that there could have been infighting between the draugrs. If we explore deep enough into the prison, we see the head of a draugr and an optergonger. These could have been between a prisoner and a guard, and they were likely trying to exact revenge on the people who abused them. Whoever was successful would either place their head on display as they always have, or as a display of cruel irony, depending on if the prisoner killed the guard, or vice versa. The prison days are now over, and this story is quite tragic for the prisoners. They were tortured in life, and even in death they continue to be tortured. However, there is still one prisoner left we must touch upon, and this one is likely the strongest of them all. In Latin, the term maledictus simply means cursed. This is certainly true of the boss Maledictus. If you remember, King Hrafkraki had a half-sister named Skuld. Skuld is one of the 3 goddesses of fate. While her sisters Urd and Verdandi often decreed favorable outcomes in the context of fate, Skuld's decrees led to more tragic comings. When King Hrolf was betrayed by Skuld, who in some depictions of Norse mythology led a siege against him and his people, where he perished. While in Norse mythology he simply dies and is given an honorable burial, I'd assume, in Cataclysm it is entirely likely that he let anger for his half-sister consume him. This anger cursed him with immortality, what was once a blessing via his sword, created by a dwarven blacksmith. Now, this immortality serves as a curse of reliving his final battle in which he lost. Over and over again, he is forced to lose. While he is a formidable adversary, the player can simply come back and continue to fight Maledictus until he falls, unless you are a hardcore player. Even here, he doesn't die. It is impossible to kill Maledictus as his life force simply soaks back into his tombstone. Aided by the many soul lanterns and fire, eventually he can be summoned again. While this benefits the player resource-wise, for Maledictus, this is an eternal pain. Who knows how many times he's gone through this battle before you came? It surely must have happened many times, as it seems even King Hrafkraki himself doesn't even remember who he was before. It's why he is called Maledictus. He doesn't remember his name. All he remembers is his curse, his maledictio. Even now, as hopeless as his case may seem, there still may be some hope left for him. Should you defeat Maledictus in battle, you are granted the achievement Crusade Against Curse. Perhaps the curse gets weaker every time he is summoned? Maybe. Just maybe. The more you defeat him, the closer he gets to his desired freedom. The story of the transition from the legendary King Hrafkraki to the forgotten cursed angel of Maledictus is quite an interesting one. It's a story about the fragility of power and to never let your guard down, as sometimes it could be one of your most trusted advisors that ends up stabbing you in the back. I'm of course not saying to never let anyone into your life. I'm simply saying that life can teach some hard lessons, so be prepared for anything. At first, I didn't know what to do for this theory. Maledictus is an interesting case, as it takes a lot of inspiration from real-world mythos, and it was quite difficult to do research without coming across a lot of Harry Potter stuff. So I'd like to give a huge shout out to my boy TV, who helped with the research about the inspirations for this boss. Without him, this theory would not have been as fun to write as it was. Next video, you can expect us to ascend into the heavens, where we find an otherworldly citadel. This citadel holds within it some sort of mutant shulker, known as the Ender Guardian. The name Guardian is interesting here, so hopefully we can find out exactly what it's guarding. If that sounds interesting to you, stay tuned for that penultimate episode of the Cataclysm series for the time being. But don't worry, I heard there was a new seafaring boss coming pretty soon, and you can bet your sand dollar we will cover that. Thank you all for watching, and I hope to catch you all next time. Wait! Before you go, be sure to check out our previous episodes on Cataclysm, our last series on Alex's Caves, and the latest Cooking with Piam. Go show her some love!